Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Becoming Chiron podcast, the key to unlocking healing and personal alchemy, with me, your hostess, Ursula Duffy. So we are officially now doing episode 1 of season 4. It's been a little over a month. I apologize for that. I've had this episode in me for a while, but now I know why it has come to be recorded today, and I will share that at the end. So today is Friday, Venus Day, May 24th of 2024, and I hit record right around 9 a.m. here in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And so this is a brand new format for the podcast. This is, like I said in the intro episode, which I'll put a link to in the episode description, kind of a return to the roots in a way. This will be more personal shares, and I shared in the intro episode very much about the plutonic process is what I'm calling it, as far as diving deeply into emotion and discussing, defining it. Actually, I have an outline here, so let's just go through the outline rather than going off the cuff. So this is what I've come up with for our season 4 episode format, and I'm going to stick to this as closely as possible. So we'll introduce the emotion and the feeling, and today's topic is fear. And I went online and researched a little bit and found one website that I usually use, dictionary.com. So we'll do some definitions. I always like to kind of explore that with words. And we'll look at the definition for the feeling and the emotion, whatever the topic is for each episode. And then we'll study the etymology, because I feel like a lot of times the root of the word, like going back to early definitions, especially with fear, and we'll see that momentarily, it actually is kind of more in alignment with what I want to dive into. So etymonline.com is the website I found for this. So we'll look at that. We'll do some screen sharing and dive into definitions and history of the word. And then we'll talk about the body part and or the chakra that's related to the emotion and the planet, and how natal placements can speak a lot to how we feel, how we handle the emotion in particular. And then some connotations, we'll just discuss it. And I really do kind of want this to be more interactive. Like I'll put some Q&As. I can do that on the Spotify post on the podcast. And feel free to also comment on YouTube. As always, my inbox is open for you if you just want to share with me how the topic resonates with you and how the discussion goes. And just if anything I'm sharing from my personal story resonates with you, I'm all ears, always. It's ursaalchemy@gmail.com. URSAALCHEMY@gmail.com. And as I said, moving forward, these will be video episodes, and you can find the video feed on Spotify as well as on our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to the audio only, like Apple Podcasts, I will do my best to convey what we're looking at on screen and what I'm sharing. So that is what I had said many months ago. Moving forward, we talked about, the astro weather checks are now standalone episodes and bonus episodes in the podcast feed. And then this is getting into our season 4 and our new format and everything. So the ball is officially rolling on all of this. So we'll go through some connotations. We'll do a little exploration of the various vibrations of the emotion, and fear is definitely one of those that I really want to get into, as far as the different ways that it feels and the different kinds of fear that there are. I think it'll be really interesting to kind of dissect it a little bit, and just, speaking from my own personal experience always. And like I said, I'm all ears as far as how it resonates with your personal experience. And I'll share some experience. I definitely want to dive pretty deeply into this one, because what I'm going to share at the end of today's episode is proof in the pudding as far as working through and alchemizing fear from my personal story. So we'll talk about that. And then I kind of want to share maybe some resources or a quote with each episode. I have some oracle cards from the Soul's Journey lesson oracle deck that I'm going to share today about fear. So we will dive into that. and I just got a notification. I have no idea what that was. So let's just ignore it. Sorry. And yeah, so here we are, episode 1, fear. And I do just want to check in with where Chiron and the moon are with each episode. So Chiron right now is at 21 degrees and 55 arc minutes of the sign of Aries, opposing my natal Pluto. We discussed that in the intro episode. So very interesting as far as the divine timing and all of this. And the moon was full yesterday morning at 9:52, 9:53 a.m. I'll also link to the astro weather check that I released last week for the full moon in Sagittarius, which, like I said, it was yesterday. And right now the moon is now waning at 15 degrees and 21 arc minutes of Sagittarius. So we'll just do a little check-in with those two cosmic weather things, as they always bear down on the podcast in some way, some form or fashion, as you know. So, all right, let's look at fear. No, thank you. Thank you, computer. Okay. So we'll look at dictionary.com first. So if you are watching the video, you can see my screen now. If you're listening to the audio feed, I am going to read from this. So from dictionary.com, fear, a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc., whether the threat is real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid. Another definition, a specific instance of or propensity for such a feeling. Or as an example, an abnormal fear of heights. So like irrational fears or something that's deeply rooted that you can't quite put your finger on. Definition 3, concern or anxiety. Definition 4, reverential awe, especially toward God. Definition 5, something that causes feelings of dread or apprehension, something a person is afraid of. And then definition 6, anticipation of the possibility that something unpleasant will occur. So those are our definitions based on the listing here on dictionary.com. And now let's look at the etymology. Fear. And this is, like I said, etymonline.com. Middle English, from Old English, quote unquote, calamity, sudden danger, peril, sudden attack. And then distress, deception, and it's going into the different nationalities here. So Old English, Dutch, Germanic. And then in the next line, it says, the sense of, quote, state of being afraid, uneasiness caused by possible danger. The meaning, quote, feeling of dread and reverence for God. So that's pretty much in perfect alignment with the other one that I read from dictionary.com. There was one in here that I actually liked better. Let's see. Let's click around in here momentarily. Apologies for the delay in this. So there was one that got like really to the nuts and bolts of what I wanted to talk about today. Maybe I don't know. This is different than when I first looked it up. I started playing this episode a while ago, y'all, obviously. Let's see. This goes into phobias. All right, well, the one that I found that perfectly described what I really wanted to talk about today was, I'm paraphrasing here as I can't read it because it's not here anymore for some reason, or I'm just in the wrong place, which is more likely the case. So we'll stop the share. So it pretty much got to describing when you're about to do something, confront something that you know in your body, like it's a visceral reaction that is going to, on the other side of whatever the thing is, bring you great reward, like pats on the back from yourself, from your higher self, from spirit, from your angels, from your team spirit, as you know, I call them. it's like a threshold moment, kind of like as I talk about squares in astrology, like it's a threshold moment, it's a challenge, it's something that when you push through it, on the other side of it, there's great reward and you've grown in some way. So that's the definition of fear that I want to talk about and focus solely on for this episode. I'm not talking about primal fear with when your life is in danger or anything like that. We're not going to go into that kind of fear. This is the fear, what I'm getting to as far as the Plutonic process, the alchemization, because by going through the process, by feeling through the emotion, you get to kind of, like I said, dissect it, analyze it, recognize it when you're feeling it in yourself. And I'll get to that and when I share the personal stories. Because you know in your heart and in your body that when you confront it, when you face it, that once you do it and you work through it and you're on the other side, you have contributed to your own personal growth in some way. That's the fear we're focusing on today. So those are the two definitions. The body part, the chakra related to fear, is the root. I'll put a link to my root episode from season 1. I shared a lot about that in my spiritual reawakening journey, just stepping out of my spiritual closet and all the fear that surrounded that. That was definitely the fear that I'm talking about today. And the root episode, as you know, I shared, if you haven't listened to that yet, listen to that, either maybe pause this one and go back and listen to it now, or listen to it after we finished today's episode, because there was an ancestral connection to that fear that I discovered when it showed up as a disease, I guess you could say, or injury to my body, or manifested in the chakra itself when I was confronting it and facing the same thing that in my family line generations had faced before. And I'm pretty sure I broke it. The buck stopped with me there on that one. So I talked about all that in that episode, so I'll link to that as well. The planet that relates to fear, planets, I guess I could say, Saturn for sure. And where your Saturn is natally by house and by sign, and aspects that it makes to your other natal planets definitely relates to fear. Mars also to an extent, but Mars more like how you face your fear. So Mars, as I say, is your sword and your shield. And it describes very much how you work through the fear, the emotion. So those two planets. And then, like just as I'm talking about this, when I started reading the definitions, just pay attention to how it felt in your body. When I said the word fear initially, like what was your reaction? Was it excitement? Was it dread? Was it, oh yeah, like that resonates. I'm familiar with that. That's definitely something I'm working on now, or I can really think back to the moments and the key points in my life where I did that and face the fear. It's not anything that usually comes with happy feelings, especially the primal fear, which, like I said, we're not really getting into today. But like for me, I'm not a big horror or scary movie type of person. I don't like forcing fear upon myself in that way. I don't like feeling afraid in that way usually. I can remember back to my childhood, which I shared quite a bit about in season 1 also, and just, being afraid of spirit and the beings that we shared the house I grew up in with. Like it was very unsettling. But working through those fears on my personal journey, which I shared about in my personal spiritual reawakening, got me, through my intuitive development class, and very much to where I am now, by really pinpointing those and deprogramming myself around it. There's a lot of societal programming that goes into the connotations when we talk about fear. The fear mongering, there's a lot of that around a lot in our world right now, like especially over the last 4 years. So it can be used as a weapon against us in a lot of ways because it is a primal thing. So think about it and as I'm going through and speaking through this episode, how are you feeling about discussing fear? How are you feeling about the idea of facing your fears? How are you feeling about the idea of learning how to approach it differently and dive deeply into it and alchemize and transmute it? Which I guess that's a good segue because there's different vibrations. So I'm talking about like a higher vibration of fears that help us achieve something. And I've alluded to this already a little bit, so let's just go more deeply into a couple personal shares that I was sort of thinking about that would probably drive this home a little bit in my personal story. Because as you know, I definitely practice what I teach, and all of this is a big personal share during this whole Becoming Chiron project. So when I really started getting into the alchemization of this fear was pretty much when I shared in my 3-part series in the beginning about my spiritual reawakening experience and confronting all of the fear around all of that I just talked about. But also when my second nodal return came around and when astrology represented itself in my life. So there was a lot of working through just nervousness about speaking up, going through that whole process, because in my intuitive development journey, once I got into the second year, I shared that I attended a class for a month, and that was a lot of group exercises and things. And you had to share, and like I had to share in class. And at that point in my life, it was hard enough for me to just open my mouth and speak. Like I would get so nervous that I didn't say anything. I didn't share anything. This happened throughout my professional development in my career as well. I didn't speak up in meetings because the thought of opening my mouth to say something was too terrifying. Being on camera, so when I signed up for my apprenticeship in 2018, I stayed off camera as much as I could because at that point I was just getting to the point of being able to speak up. Being on camera was another whole level of terrifying. Having my first set of astrology readings was terrifying. Just having to open my mouth and talk about myself and share, and even dive deeply into sharing about the spiritual reawakening journey. Like every time I put myself in the chair, turned on the whatever, the phone, the Zoom, every single time I just to get myself there was pushing through a tremendous amount of fear. So every time I forced myself to do it, I pushed through it. I alchemized and transmuted it. I did what I could in the moment when I was feeling too afraid to speak up, but at some point I didn't really have much of a choice otherwise, because I had to start interacting with my classmates again. We had in my apprenticeship, it was classes, but it was also what they called labs. And we had a partner every month, I guess it was, our partners would change. So we were responsible for doing exercises together and reading for each other and practicing on each other and that kind of thing. So that kind of helped me through opening up, because it was a peer. I guess sometimes too, it was like an authority thing, like with work or with a teacher, being afraid to speak up just because, I don't know, maybe I perceived myself as below the person. I'm not sure. Part of working through it helped resolve all that anyway. But in May, it's actually really interesting. It came up in my memories in my online photo storage the other day. You know how you get memories, your memories from this day, however many years ago or whatever. And from May of 2018, pictures came back up in my feed from my apprenticeship. So when I went to that retreat, and I shared about this in the first season, I had to give my first reading in person. Yikes. It was hard enough doing it over the phone and on camera with classmates. Like, God, like just getting to that retreat was pushing through a lot. So this is what I'm getting at. You see me now here. I mean, you can listen back to the first episode of this podcast and see what I discussed, just getting myself in the chair, getting myself like all the whole first roughly 3 seasons, I guess, are all audio only. Just interacting like this on video, I would never have done it 5, 6 years ago. I would have been too afraid. When I had my first podcast interview, I was so like, I knew I had to say yes. I knew I had to do it. And when I said yes, and I knew I had to do it, I over prepared, and wrote myself like 4 or 5 pages of everything that I wanted to answer. Like, I didn't have the questions ahead of time. I had no idea. So, but like everything that I wanted to say, I scripted. Like, this is where I was at back then. This is 2020, I think. So like, graduated after the apprenticeship, after pushing through everything. Now I'm getting into my professional, like my, being a professional astrologer and sharing my story and reading for people, and people, asking to interview me and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just like, oh my God, like that's next level. Like, I just got through all of this other stuff, you know? So, and a lot of it too, that I realized time after pushing myself through it, was the nervousness was also kind of excitement. There was that mixture of the two in there as well. And once I kind of got over the jitters and the nervousness, I kind of got right into my zone. So, can you relate? What about your own personal journey and things that used to terrify you that you're now doing with ease and grace and growth every time? That's the kind of stuff that I want you to all to start thinking about, and my intention really behind this episode. And with every episode, I'm not sure what the next emotion will be. It will reveal itself to me when it's ready. And we'll do episode 2 at that point. These, like I said, aren't really on a time schedule. So yeah, I think you all are getting the gist at this point. And you can go back and listen to any episode from season 1 where I share way more personal stories about pushing through all of this, and so much fear. Seriously, it's just so much fear. So you can do it too. I am living proof. And I'm sure, however, long from now, I'm comfortable here in this point. It's really too, like, for me, especially getting out of my comfort zone, being forced out of my comfort zone, and knowing that if I don't do the thing, that I will regret it. That's a big thing that's come into all this too. Like, I started really seeing other people, not intentionally, but getting really other people pointing out to me, not, for mass, not in a good way, I guess is what I'm trying to say, where I didn't face the fear. And I really did start feeling a lot of regret. And I had to work through that too. And sort of, I don't know if it was fear of being seen. I'm not, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that I'm thinking about as I'm talking is very much related to staying in my spiritual closet. So I hope that this at least helps you work through some things maybe that you haven't worked through yet. This is where the Chiron really comes into play. This is where we get to unlock the key. We get to use our key, our Chiron key, and unlock all of this. And even just start thinking about it if you haven't yet, or if you do feel regret over something that you didn't do because you were too afraid to do it. If you get presented with the same opportunity again to do the damn thing and work through it, and don't hold back because you saw what happened when you didn't do it before, and the possibilities are endless when you actually do it. So at the very least, I hope this is encouraging and just food for thought. And yeah, so one of the quotes that kind of came across my Instagram feed that I wanted to share with this episode today, like all these pieces really kind of have been getting shown to me within the last month. So I knew fear was the first topic for sure. So this is from the Tiny Buddha official account on Instagram. And the quote is, "Accepting the emotion you're feeling gives the power back to you. To avoid is to amplify, and to acknowledge is to release." So think about that as well. It's tinybuddha.com is where this account is from. So I wanted to share that. And I want to share the oracle cards next. And then I'll share my exciting news. The result of me, good Lord, 2015 is when the reawakening started. So almost 10 years of consistently, most of the time, pushing through the fear. And I want to show you what's possible because I am living proof. Okay, so from the Soul's Journey lesson cards by James Van Praagh. If you've been with me for a while, you know I love using this deck when it comes to Saturnian energy in particular. And because Saturn is the one planet that relates very much to our sense of fear in our natal charts and all the other things that come along with that, we're going to read from this deck today. And I pulled 3 cards because I want to kind of go through fear itself and then working through fear and the other side of fear. From A Course in Miracles, we learned that there are only 2 emotions, love and fear. So we're going to read the fear card, the courage card, and the love card. So for the fear card, and I'm showing this on the video episode, just so everyone who's listening to audio knows, that these cards are incredibly beautiful because each one has its own color, style, and mandala. And the fear card has this incredibly beautiful, looks like a square, but it kind of looks like it's also on fire. And the primary color of the card itself is yellow, which definitely relates to the solar plexus chakra. And that ties in as well when we're feeling and confronting our fears. So the message on the card, I realize that I am testing my resolve to live in the energy of love. The outcome of all choices in life is determined by 2 emotions, fear and love. Your soul is made of the energy of love, and fear is an earthly manifestation of a challenge. To embrace and wallow in fear is to go against your very being. Fear, in its many guises, is the obstacle that your soul uses to test its tenacity to stay on track. For a soul, human life can be very difficult, but acknowledging that your soul's true nature is love will always help you on your path. When fear rears its ugly head, it is really an opportunity for you to stare it in the eye and turn that doubt into trust. View it as a teacher. What lesson are you learning from these fearful emotions? The more you use the energy of love to diffuse fearful situations, the less often they will present themselves. So that is what I'm talking about. So that's the fear card. And then courage is the thing that we need, and bravery to face the fears. This is the Mars part. The courage card is a circular mandala that has rings of color. The outer ring is purple. The middle ring is reddish, then it goes to orange, then it goes to yellow, and in the center it's black. So it almost reminds me of the symbol for the sun, the circle with the bindi in the center. And then on this card, the primary color is purple, which very much relates to our healing journey. So there's that Chiron part again. So our Chiron, in a way, and our Mars, I think, of when I'm looking at this card. So the message on the courage card, I find inner strength to face fear with confidence. There's that solar plexus chakra again. You need to remind yourself that part of the challenge of being a soul is learning to honor your own power. By listening to your inner voice and following its advice, you are acknowledging the perfection of your intuition. Fear is only an illusion, and obstacles are great opportunities for you to demonstrate that coming from a place of love will conquer all of fear's disguises. Perhaps you are changing career paths or entering or exiting a relationship. This test has been put before you because it is an opportunity to prove to yourself that you and only you can make the correct decision. By not taking that step forward, you may find yourself 2 steps back, only to face that same obstacle again. Yes, I shared that. I talked about that. I didn't read this before, so I just love it when everything resonates in the cards in particular. So that's the courage card. Now we get the love card. The love card, so the courage cards are very deep, deep purple. The love card, another circular mandala with multiple rings. The outer ring on this one is red. Middle is light purple. And then in the center is this beautiful flower looking shape. Kind of like reminds me of the orbit of Venus. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then the petals, I guess you could say, the color of those is red. And then the inner part of the petals is purple and like a lighter to a deeper purple. And then the center of this card, it's kind of like a muted yellow, I guess you could say. And then the primary color on the card overall is light purple. So for the love card, I commit to the practice of seeing the good in all things. You are love. It is your inherent vibration. The obstacles and challenges of the physical dimension attempt to trick you into thinking that there are other ways to view life, but there is only one way that is natural to your being: love. This card simply reminds you that your soul is made of God's pure divine vibrational force of love, and that you need to bring this awareness to bear on every aspect of your life and being. Love is a healing energy. All anxiety and drama cannot exist in the aura of love. Most souls have come back upon this earth to learn, accept, and utilize this harmonic force and to see its effect upon their lives. It is your time to remind others of the strength of their own power of God and assist them in knowing fully that love is the most powerful element in the universe. It builds, fortifies, and strengthens even the most lost person. When we live in the power of love, then and only then will we know truth. True love is the spiritual link between us and God. It will guide our footsteps through the conflicts of the material world and will cleanse our hearts of unwanted facets of the human personality. So there's the love card for you. So fear, courage, and love. This would be a really cool 3-card spread if this was an organic oracle card reading. That would pretty much go perfectly with this episode. So there's all of that. I went through my outline. So I think we can wrap up for today. It's been about 35 minutes. So I am so excited to share with all of you the most recent development for me. As you know, I shared in season 1 that this whole project, this whole Becoming Chiron thing was extremely divinely guided. And it was a lot of inspiration and messages that I received as answers to prayers, especially through my dreams. You know that if you've been with me the whole time, all of season 1, 2, 3, all of that was very divinely guided. You know that I pray to Chiron and to the planets, and I work with them just like I do spirit guides and angels and ancestors. They're part of my team. The planets and the asteroids, like they're all just part of team spirit. And I shared in the introductory episode of this season that the earlier part of this year was definitely another dark night of the soul experience for me. I wrote about it in the poem that I read in the intro episode with the Plutonic process. It was definitely another deep and kind of scary underworld journey. I was very close to giving up this whole mission, this whole new life, I guess you could say. I shared in my Great Resignation episode in season 1, my exit from the corporate world almost 3 years ago. And everything that I worked through, also tons of fear around that. The ancestral healing came up through that process. So this is why I'm saying I'm living proof. In January, I had my down on my knees praying kind of experience once again. Things were a little scary. Business was slow. I wasn't getting to work. I just get so lit up when I get to work with people. Like I keep saying one-on-one readings is just like my absolute favorite thing. It just lights me up. It plugs me in. Like I just feel like I got a recharge from spirit, and it lasts for hours after the reading is done. So that's how I know that that's my purpose to an extent. Like it fuels me. It fuels my soul. And I sent a request up, sent a prayer up to Team Spirit, like, okay, what is this done? Is it time to throw in the towel? Like, do I have to go back to corporate work or something else that's not in alignment with this path? Like, throw me a bone here, because this is really hard. It just gets really scary. Like, we still have to live in this 3D world. We still have bills to pay. And when it's just slow, it's scary. So it took a little while. I sent that request up. Maybe a week later, I had another waking dream. And this kind of caught me really off guard. And I questioned it. And the answer was reach out to Shore Local News Magazine and propose the idea of contributing weekly horoscopes. I'm like, what? As you know, if you work with spirit, sometimes you're just like, are you serious? Because that was a whole other ball of wax as far as working through fears. Like, there were 2 things that were said to me when I had my initial readings. And this person who did them ended up being my teacher. And one thing that he said was podcasting. And I had that visceral reaction, like one of the strongest ones ever. Like, no way. Me? Are you kidding? Hell no. And you see how long it took me to do that, because that was in 2017 and I did episode 1 in 2022. Not putting time frames on any of this. It's just, I know it's all unfolding in divine order and according to plan, like everything. And I'll get to that in a minute. And the other thing was, like, I had such resistance to it. So I didn't know then quite what it was, but now that I've gone through this so much, I know that one of the things that you viscerally resist the most is probably one of the things that you're really meant to do. So that was one, podcasting. And then the other one was forecasting. So little by little, a very dear friend planted a seed last year in April for us to work together monthly. You know who you are if you're listening. Infinite gratitude to you. And I was a little resistant to that, but I'm like, okay, I can go through the transits for each month and kind of, like, it's kind of become this. This is how I work with it now. I go through each month, and there's some things I'm aware of, but other things that are a little bit more nuanced that come in as I start looking. So like at the end of every month, I make my list of what's happening for the month, and then I do the monthly check-in with her. And I was a little resistant to that too, but I was comfortable with it because we've been working together for a little while now, and I was just like, okay, that could be cool. That could lead somewhere. I didn't really know where, but that was about a year ago. And so that kind of got me stepping out of the comfort zone a little bit around forecasting. And then, as you know, that became part of each podcast episode, the astro weather checks in the beginning. So it's been a process, and it's definitely been meeting people along the way that have helped me. The ideas come not always from myself and from spirit. And then I'm like, okay. And then I do it and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. So when that answer, that dream, that answer to my prayer came that morning, that waking dream, I was still kind of half in and out. I'm like, wait, what? I have to write this down. I thought about it and I'm like, well, I'm kind of already doing this with my one person, with my monthly check-ins. I could grow that in some kind of way. So I sat with it for a while. And then it started kind of coming up more and more. So I'm like, all right, I have to take action. The Mars part came in. The fear was worked through to an extent. Excuse me. And I timed it astrologically. And it all kind of unfolded in perfect divine order according to my own lesson plan and my own chart. I timed it with the beginning of the last Mercury cycle, so mid-April. It was in a specific part of my own chart. And I knew that the timing was right. So I sent an email proposing the idea and pretty much presenting the answer to my prayer, and it was accepted. And they were excited about it because it's something that has never been in Shore Local magazine before. They've never featured horoscopes. So that, of course, was still Mercury retrograde. It was eclipse season. It was all the things. So I knew it would probably take some time to really come into fruition, but it finally did. And they were so cool. And they were like, let's time it so it can debut in the Memorial Day weekend edition. So I'm not really thinking about the timing of all of that. And when I did the Sagittarius full moon astro weather check last week, I had already written what I was submitting for this week's edition. And it happened to be the edition that was coming out the day of the full moon. So, as you know, if you've been with me for a while, my lunar cycle work is more so with the long game. So, new moon to full moon in the same sign, 6 months. This one is sort of a manifestation from that back in December of 2023, December 12th to be exact, was when we had the Sagittarius new moon. But also the Taurus new moon was super magical. So I did big ceremony around that too. So this is like a manifestation of the long-term and short-term lunar cycles simultaneously in the intentions that I set back in December, as far as showing up more as my most authentic self in the world, in my work. This is a super public way to be showing up. This magazine gets distributed all around South Jersey, and there's an online version as well. So it extends beyond this physical location, this state. So I am very excited to share with you all my first edition horoscopes in the Shore Local News magazine. And if you are looking at if you're in this area and you know where to get a paper copy, most Wawa's, restaurants, liquor stores have them in the little stands kind of by the door where like the auto shopper, truck shopper, that kind of stuff is. And they have a QR code in the front to read the online version. If you're looking at the coastal edition, which is the one that I have, because obviously I live on the coast, they have a mainland edition also. It's page 20. So if you are watching the video, you can see my exciting news. There it is. And a little ad for Sea Goddess is in there as well. And it's almost 2 pages. So I took a stab at it. I think I did pretty well with the writing. And that's just it too. Like I was really called to dive really deeply this year and kind of get back to my own roots of writing. Like that poem, I talked about it in the intro episode, that came out of the place that I used to really love writing from. poetry and short stories, and I was published in my high school literary magazine. Like it all just, Virgo moon, hello. Um, Getting back to writing was really something. Like I did a whole journaling practice in January, like doing a really deep dive into the unconscious parts of myself, the subconscious parts of myself that are wanting and ready to come to the surface. And that was my whole intention for this year, for the month of January. And obviously, a dark night of the soul came out of it because I'm confronting my own shadows. So the fact that this manifested yesterday, um, it it just blows me away. The divine timing that's always at play is just, I mean, I live this, I work with this. Like I said, I practice what I teach, but to then see it sometimes in my own life, the way that it comes into play, it rocks my world. So that will be something new that I'm doing that comes out every Thursday. And we'll be sharing them cross promoting through Sea Goddess as well. So you can find them on our socials. I'll put a link to the online version in today's episode description and notes, and I'll include it every time that I release an episode, whether it's a Becoming Chiron episode or an astro weather check. I actually did get the astro weather check done last weekend in time. They included the link for that also in print and on the online version. So that was another cool thing that they said, that they would include the link to my astro weather checks when they're ready for the weekly submission on YouTube. So living proof, as I said, confronting the fear, working through the fear, alchemizing, transmuting, like everything that I discussed and talked about in the intro episode is, I mean, you can see it. You can see how it manifests. You can see what potential is there on the other side of it, and the pats on the back. Like, it was so exciting yesterday when I finally got to announce that, because I mean, really, that was a dream and an idea from January that I just kept kind of to myself for a while. I told close friends and people, obviously partners and coworkers, because it's going to affect my weekly schedule to an extent, but they were cool with it and they were so supportive, and I'm just so grateful. And just that courage and that perseverance, like, everyone, you have it in you. You've got it. You've got this. So excited for that. Thank you all for being here. Definitely the easiest way to support the show, the podcast, the effort, the project is likes, shares, follows, reviews. There's still very few reviews. You can do that really easily on Apple Podcasts. Just scroll to the bottom of the podcast feed and leave stars or a review. Donations $8.99 per month. You can subscribe through that on Spotify. If you are wanting to support me financially, I would greatly appreciate it. And that's it. Like I said, I don't know when the next emotion will plant itself in me and what it's going to be, but you will know when I do, and that'll be episode 2. And then until then, this tagline is becoming more and more important to me and more of my reality. Till next time. And then also the bonus episodes will continue with the astro weather checks. So keep tuning in for those. The next one will be around the Gemini new moon on that'll be on the 6th, but I'll probably do that episode way in advance because I'll probably want to submit it with my horoscopes. So till next time, remember to be a maverick. Bye.